So thank you ever so much. It's a very busy theatre, which is fantastic. My name is Austin Earl. I head up EdTech and Education at Tech UK. So we're joined by a really fantastic panel of speakers. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but just another bit of housekeeping. Your questions, we really do want to hear them, so please do sit on them when you have them and ask them at the end. We're going to try and get through the panel discussion as quick as possible so you can ask your questions. Also, we'll be referencing a few resources, articles, projects in the discussion in order for you to go away and read up about that and access those links. There's going to be a QR code that I'm going to share at the end of the session. If I don't do that, throw a hand at me. And if you can scan that, that just means you've got all those access ready. So without further ado, I'm going to ask our speakers to introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, can you hear me okay? Yes, brilliant. My name's Nick Ponsford. I'm a doctoral researcher. I was a teacher. I'm also EdTech founder of the GC, and my side project is working for Microlink around assistive technologies.
Thanks very much.
Hello, this is a little bit like silent disco, so I'm hoping that you'll choose this channel to listen to what I'm saying. I'm Renata Sampson. I work at the Lovelace Institute. I co-authored a report at the start of the year for Ada and the Nuffield Foundation about education and AI, but I've been in the data, tech, AI, digital space for a very long time, predominantly working in policy. So I'm not an education expert, but I do know about digital lives. Nice to meet you all.
Thanks very much. Lizzie?
Hello everyone, lovely to be here with you all this morning. I'm Lizzie Guinness. I work for the Department for Education and I head up the team that's responsible for AI and assistive tech strategy.
Good morning, I'm Gerard Power from the University of East Anglia in Norwich. I'm involved a lot with digital transformation projects across a whole range of areas of the economy, and I'm also a co-PI with an educational technology project funded by the Economic and Social Sciences Research Council.
Thanks very much. So we'd asked the organisers to focus on 3 questions, but we've extended that to 4. So we're going to try and rattle through those as quick as possible for your questions. But the first one was all about what kind of conversations should school leaders be having? How much should they be investing, I suppose, mentally in understanding AI, and then also kind of delimiting that, so what is overreach? And I'd like to come to Renata first on this question, because it's not just a question of how, but there are lots of other considerations I know that you surfaced in the AI Learning Curve report. Again, the link will be in the QR code, but yeah, Renata.
Thanks. I mean, it's a tricky one, right? We're all trying to save money and teach in difficult circumstances, and also have a home life and maintain our mental health, and also ensure that children get a great education and can go on and thrive. And ChatGPT and large language models and generative AI all seem to be offering an easy solution. And yeah, it's going to bring all sorts of benefits, but it's also not going to be the solution for every problem. And a group of teachers might sit in a room with some technologists and say, God, I just need somebody to take away all the hours I'm spending marking. Can you build a solution for that? And the technologist is going to go, yeah, easy. But then when do we stop and think about, well, how are we going to know that it's the right solution? Is there evidence to demonstrate that it's going to do exactly what we're hoping it will do? Where's the data coming from? What's the data based on? Lots of easy to access, free large language models such as ChatGPT are trained on data sets from the entire internet. That means an awful lot of content that's completely inappropriate for the classroom. It's completely inappropriate for teaching. So how do we then start to think about technologies that are built on data that is appropriate, that's curriculum relevant, that's age relevant, that will actually support people in their jobs? So first of all, there's no easy solution. Secondly, a solution that is seen to be for everything is not often the solution for everything. And where we think it might bring us real benefit, it might actually disrupt in a very unhelpful way that we might not really understand for a decade. The internet. We're all old enough to, I think, looking around, to remember the start of the internet 20 odd years ago, and the journey that the internet has gone on. What might have felt really exciting and completely uncontroversial and unharmful at the start, putting up photos of your holidays and sharing content with all your friends and family, now is subject to an enormous bill, the Online Safety Act, that demonstrates all the harms that can come from that. We're at the start of the generative AI journey, or the general purpose AI journey. I propose that we need to stop and think and not just see that this is the opportunity, and if we don't jump on it quickly, we're somehow falling behind. Better to take your time and think about what you need it for than just to adopt it willy-nilly. And the critical things to think about are where the data is coming from, the transparency of that, what you're going to use it for, what data you're going to put into it, what impact it's going to have actually on your working life, but also on the people that you're teaching. Also, bigger issues, what's it going to do to the environment? What's it going to do to your role as a teacher? How is that going to change how teacher training might need to happen in the future? But also, what are you going to do to ensure that a technology that is learning on its own and that you're learning with is able to manage you at that moment in time, and you're able to manage it, because one's always going to be more powerful than the other. So as a starting point, I think that's what I'd like to say.
Amazing, thank you so much. And as I mentioned, a lot of the kind of what you should be considering, you've laid out really well, I think, in the Learning Curve report. Nick, I want to come to you on this as well, because when we had a conversation about this, there were also broader considerations, and Renata's kindly mentioned kind of energy, which we'd spoken about, but supply chain, geopolitics, lots of things in question here, and I know you'd mentioned them in our conversation. So,
I'll talk about data later, obviously, and I'm going to talk about something that people don't maybe associate with me, but would be responsibility. And I think as leaders, one of the things we have to think about is our responsibility using AI. I am a techno geek. I have loved technology, it runs through me, but with AI, we do have carbon footprints and sustainability issues. And I think after being a school leader myself, we do have to question what kind of leader we want to be. Are we going to be a purposeful, ethical leader? So for example, one generated image in AI is the same as boiling a kettle. 1,000 images is the same as a tree. So if you're working in a school of a trust and you're generating this, I feel that there is a ethical and sustainable argument that you need to think about where is your responsibility when it comes to this. And we do need to think of this not only as a system and a sector, but also with our individual context and what we are therefore illustrating to our staff and our young people when it comes to things around climate change and our use of AI in particular.
Brilliant stuff. And we're doing some stuff at Tech UK to kind of survey the sector on kind of knowledge around sustainability and technology, so really keen to hear from the sector. Lizzie, I want to come to you on this one as well, because we're not starting from zero. There's lots of groundwork that has been done and that is being done at the DFE to help answer some of these questions for leaders. So.
Yeah, no, I can come in, and I think we're going to be a panel who are probably largely going to agree, because I think we all really care about the kind of same risks and the same opportunities that AI and other technology can bring. If we're going back to kind of conversations that you should be having in your education setting, one of the starting points for us is consider your digital strategy. Make sure you do have a digital strategy which includes AI. We know that through our technology in schools survey, that leaders where they do have a digital strategy in place are able to make more informed decisions about where technology, including AI, can make an impact and in an effective way and in a considered way around some of those pressures that Renata was talking about around teacher workload. The department have 11 digital and tech standards which give you quite a lot of guidance on this, including one around digital leadership. I know Austin's going to put the link up there. So I'd really encourage you to be thinking about that as part of your conversation. And we also have a service called Plan Technology for your school, which again will help you with making some of these informed decisions. There's lots and lots I could say around AI. I think for me it's about consider use cases and the problem first. No, don't just go straight to AI. Consider what is the problem you're trying to solve and what technologies could be the solution for it, because it's not just AI. So let's think about that carefully. We also have a generative AI policy position statement, which again will be on the QR code, and that sets out quite a lot of the broad principles, and it links very much to what Renata was saying around safety first. Don't forget your obligations that you already have around GDPR, safeguarding, intellectual property, risk assess before you use, think carefully, and utilise the guidance that's out there that government's putting out, and also lots of other organisations are putting out, including Tech UK and others.
Thanks so much. And Jared, when we'd spoken about this as well, there's another lens, which is, I suppose, the risk appetite within the sector. There's a lot of diversity there, and that can cause some tension. Right?
I think the word diversity is quite important here because we keep saying AI. There are thousands of different algorithms that are used for different applications and purposes. They vary in scale, they vary in performance, the amount of memory they require, the accuracy, the repeatability. So I think we need to be quite careful when we just banty around the term AI. There are many facets to that particular aspect. The other thing here, I think, is this notion of risk averse. In senior management in schools, I'm a governor in a primary school in Norwich. We can see the opportunities. To what extent is it reducing the workload and the stress levels of the teachers involved and the senior management? Can we predict how we can minimise energy costs on a school premise? To what extent are we looking at technology that's on-premise or is in the cloud? And where does the risk for data management come in and the level of responsibility? And as you say, you could breach GDPR very, very quickly. It also raises the concern about who is providing the technology solutions for my school. Is it the same provider as the whole county? Is the county council involved, the Department for Education? And to what extent can we have better optimisation of the procurement systems that allow us to have better standards of the technology that we use in the schools themselves? So there are a number of opportunities for sure. The notion of how to manage the risk can always start with the data and putting, as already been mentioned, putting the student at the centre of all of this, because it's not just what happens in the school environment. What about the home environment? Where do parents fit in all of this? And how do the parents get educated and get better informed about the rules, regulations and acceptable use policies for the use of these types of technologies?
And I want to stay with you if that's all right, because you mentioned obviously AI being very diverse, lots of complexity. It's not getting simpler. If anything, the pace of change in EdTech UK, we've got lots of different AI companies constantly coming to us, new products. So there's a kind of headache maybe on the horizon with all this development going on. But education aren't the only sector dealing with, I think, this kind of fast-paced development of AI.
I mean, for sure. I mean, we look at, predictive analytics have been around for centuries in many different forms. You mentioned the role of the internet. I was privileged to work in California with one of the four fathers, if you like, of the internet, Professor John Postel. The whole notion of how the tools and techniques are used for earthquake prevention, for detecting skin disease, for looking at drug discovery. And again, depending on the application, there are different algorithms that can be used. So we need to understand what is the application in the school environment that you want to use these technologies for. Is it for energy reduction, optimization of the timetabling system? Is it looking at predicting grades? Each one of those comes with different ethical, performance and legal requirements. Some are very easy to fix. You could do it on a spreadsheet. You don't need any sophisticated tools. So it again depends what is the context for the application of the technology in the school environment, and has the, if you like, has the red, amber, green risk assessment been done correctly? Bringing the parents into the loop again, I think, is very, very important.
And there was another thing you mentioned, I think, in our conversation, which is when do schools, how do schools learn how to, I think it was wait, follow, or lead? Like how do they decide when to fall into one of those camps, I think, around the introduction of AI?
Again, if you're a standalone school or you're part of an academy and so on, you may have that the benefit of watching others succeed or fail fast. I think if you're, depending on what the setup is of the school structure itself, you can watch other domains to see where certain tools have been useful. You think from a primary school right to a university, looking at how we use AI in technical writing. There's another aspect to this. To what extent are the AI tools that are being used promoting creativity? And I think it was mentioned in one of our previous sessions, critical thinking. Are we sort of pushing things to the side that we could suffer later for not having thought through the procedures?
And then I'll come back to Lizzie, if that's all right, because again, there's some of the stuff that Jared was talking about that has been well considered at DFE in terms of advising the sector on, kind of what practical support might be available to them. And you referenced a couple earlier, but
Yeah. No, I'm happy to chip in, and yeah, like Jared, I agree with you around like we need to consider carefully use cases and where should we be leaders or fast followers or wait and see. You know, our approach, and it's documented in our policy paper, is to really consider risks. And I think using AI and other technologies directly with students, there's a lot of things that need to be considered there. So like you're saying, critical thinking skills, the impact on meta cognition. We don't want to create that long-term damage for young people in how they might need to be learning those skills. I do think there are potentially opportunities for use cases for young people, and I know we'll talk about that a bit more later, but you can see that it could be really supportive for children who have additional needs, so there's adaptations that can be put in place to support with that. But I agree with you on that. I think the department announced in January that we are developing some training for leaders and teachers on the safe and effective use of AI. My team's leading on that work, and I know it's very, very nearly ready to be published, so you can hope to hear from us very soon on that, and that will be freely available for people to understand more, because I think it's like, as leaders, as teachers and educators, we all, and as civil servants as well, we all need to really understand AI properly for ourselves so that we can then make decisions about where the effective use cases are. Shall I pause there? There's always lots I can say. We're doing quite a lot of work on AI at the moment, funnily enough.
Yeah, because I want to bring Nick in on this one, if that's all right, because we'll talk about obviously the training needs, but you've got a kind of good historicity of understanding maybe confidence around EdTech in the sector, because it's not homogenous, is it?
No. So I've worn lots of hats, and I was also part of the DFE EdTech demonstrator in 2020. We got 11,000 schools online. Following that, I've led on the DFE Assistive Technology pilot and programme, which, when the funding ended on that, HSBC have generously funded for the last 2 years. And so I think we've had about 500 schools. And I started teaching in 2000 when the Google browser came in, and I remember the mass panic of what's going to happen when the kids Google how to write an essay. And I kind of feel that panic is happening now. I think my frustration is that everyone's trying to nail down policies, and actually we're being quite short-sighted when it comes with AI. I think people that have been in the space knew the lesson planning and teacher workload, crucial for recruitment and retention, would be important. But I think for me, we need to start thinking about what could it do, that tech for good. So what are we not measuring? What are we not doing in education, which actually AI can support us with? And you know, assistive technology isn't just for SEND users and the kids in a bolt-on unit. Assistive I use all the time. It's a way of making my life easier. And technology, for some of our staff and for some of our students, it's not a nice, a thing to have. It's a necessity. It's life-changing. And what I think I'm starting to see with the lack of adoption and the inconsistent adoption, we are creating a huge digital divide when it comes to the use of AI. Because if my child goes to one school and gets access to AI in one way but doesn't in a neighbouring school, those life chances and unlocking of potential are hindered due to a system that is meant to unlock it. So I do think there's a little bit, we need to look at the safeguarding as we do with any EdTech, and I think it's very hard for leaders if they don't come from a tech background and don't understand. But there is a lot of expertise out in the system. I think we all want to work together on this, but I think we need to kind of take it to the next level, which I could go on, but I'll stop.
Can I build on her point? Austin said we're allowed to kind of just come in, so I'm going to take that. So I think this also links to what you're saying about digital and AI literacy for young people, and actually, yes, I'm saying caution with tools, but we also all have a responsibility as leaders, as educators, on ensuring that young people are going to have the skills fit for the future, and they can use, like Renata was saying, like technology sensibly and carefully. So we have an expert advisory group at the moment as part of the task and as part of the curriculum assessment review, looking at this specifically for us, because the department does recognise that that's really important. So there's a balancing act, isn't there, between like risk and opportunity, and ensuring that our young people are set up for the future. Renata wants to come in now.
Yeah, and then one thing.
Do you want to
Is that all right? Just quick. Yeah, I mean, I think my worry, and I do want to talk to the DfE about it, is like we had all smart boards come in. So this isn't the first time we've looked at technology at mass scale. And I think what I've learned is, schools don't always need to wait for the DfE. And it's a very hard job getting it consistently out there. Actually, as school leaders and trust leaders, we need to be responsible. And also, understand what we're saying when we're talking about AI, understanding the responsibility, but also understanding what do we want for our students that maybe isn't in a policy or we haven't seen yet. What do we want to do with the system going forwards for the next 10 years? And I think that's important to look at everything, but also, your people in the building, what do they need?
I think that's a permission thing, isn't it? And Renato,
one of the curious things at Lovelace Institute, we look at the use of technology and data-driven technology, which is the old term for AI, across the public sector. Technology can be used to do some things really efficiently. Some of the things mentioned, like identifying whether need a different policy, or an easy to answer, not yes or no, but a relatively straightforward question can be answered really well using technology and data. Where we seem to come a cropper repeatedly is when it's used to try and solve really complex problems, and that's about people or relationships, or tries to intervene in humanity, if you wish. Now, with teaching, there are an awful lot of great uses you can use data for, and taking away the blank page, the fear of the blank page, is one of them for teachers and for pupils. Predictive analytics that you might use for administration technology, it was said earlier, make sure that the pupil is center of that. Make sure the pupil is center of that. The decisions that are made by predictive analytics can impact individuals for the rest of their life. It's often hard to hold that in our heads. Where we really struggle in the public sector is that an IT team may say, you need this to make this more efficient. A leadership manager, someone in leadership will say, that's great, that will save us a lot of money. But those of us who are frontline workers, teachers, whatever, we're being asked to use it to intervene, to support, to challenge, to disrupt relationships. And that's where things can get really icky. So when you're being asked to use these technologies, whilst there's of course a desire to make lots of things more efficient, we also need to say, actually, this isn't going to help me here. It might be really helpful to have a very basic decision tree, for example, to identify that this student over here needs support on this, and that aligns with 5 other students in your class. But that maybe is where it stops. Then it's for you as the teacher, as the professional, as the trained person, to figure out what you do next. The risk here is that we start to give more power to this is what you should do next than it's really worth. So I think we talked about that there's lots of different types of AI, there's lots of different types of data, there's lots of different types of uses. Come together collectively, holistically, with all the different teams, pupils, parents, all the different parts of your school, local authority, to really then discuss the sort of icky, weird, hard to define, nuanced relationship part of using these technologies, and decide if you actually feel comfortable with that. I think that's a really important thing to consider, and it's often the hardest thing to ask, the hardest thing to discuss.
And I think also, like you mentioned, lots of other different public sector bodies have been through that change and are indeed going through exactly the same.
Absolutely, and we have work looking at the use of data-driven tech in social care, where there is such a desperate need to try and solve extremely complicated problems, intersecting issues across the board that people can't solve, and yet we somehow think that technology is going to help us solve it. Well, technology will give some insights, but not all the insights, that are often based on just relationships, on your own sense of knowing what's right or wrong. I mean, there's some work happening, a lot of work happening, great work happening with regards to looking at marking and assessment and how we could use AI to do that. And one of the big arguments is it will take out bias. Well, it might, depending on what data it's trained on, bringing other bias. We can't ever get away from bias. There's no 100% bias-free environment. There's no 100% security, a secure environment, for example. Understanding, taking the time to think about what something's really going to do and where it will really bring benefit or risk is one of the big challenges, I think.
And Nick, I know you wanted to come in on here. This one.
Yeah, so I've designed a platform that does look at relationships. But it doesn't use AI when it's taken in that information, because one of the issues that we've got, a lot of the data that we get in traditionally is very surface level. And therefore, when we're in the sector looking at information, recently there's been a lot of noise about white British boys, because that's what our data captures. It doesn't necessarily capture also if they're non-binary, if they're neurodivergent. And the data that we've collected with the GEC platform, we've surveyed 26,000 students and school members. And for students, it actually turns out that single-parent students have the least sense of belonging in school, but we don't normally capture that. So what EdTech can help us with is understanding data and creating new models that don't exist to move away from surface level metrics. What AI can do, and this is part of the doctoral work I'm doing at the moment, is we've got 1.8 million rows of data times by 26,000. And I was an English and media teacher. I hate Excel, I hate spreadsheets. So I'm looking at how we could do visualization in a way that helps leaders. But I'm using AI at the moment. I'm working with school-based AI developers. I'm working internationally. I'm working with different academics and organisations to look at how we can look at ethical ways of allowing school leaders to interrogate live data. So we don't have to wait a year for a report, that we can look at our context and look at that live data. And that's where we're moving to. We're starting to see other systems doing that. But in some cases, AI is appropriate. And in some cases, it's not. And I think it's having that confidence to know. But, you know, AI is allowing us to move at a speed, understanding data, getting live information, and starting to find out what's possible.
I think that also will support the DFE, right? Like, the best policy making is evidence-based. And we've been talking about this a bit, like in the round around, like, sometimes it's hard for us to get that data and that evidence and that real-time information. And I think there's a really interesting piece of work to be exploring around data interoperability and how can we get that working better between education settings and policymakers, and setting that flow up, which doesn't add lots of admin burden to colleges and settings and MATs. I know they have lots of data requirements that we put on them. So there is early work that we're doing on that, because I think it works both ways, like getting that level of nuance. Like, we've never been able to have that at government level before. So it'd be brilliant. Yeah.
Let's talk, Lizzie.
Yeah. Just one other thing. I'm involved with another project looking at digital transformation, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And even though this is the world I work in, we're very conscious that we're building digital crutches everywhere. And to the extent that we have the business continuity model sitting behind us, that when things go wrong, for whatever reason, it could be a JCB back bucket outside the school grounds that pulls up the cable to the exchange. So many things that have been badly designed, badly deployed, and the user was not at the center of it. And to the extent that we look at how do we provide, with my colleague Professor John Gordon, we have the project on teacher agency, EdTech for promoting teacher agency. To what extent are we helping build teacher resilience with all of these new technologies and all the promises that are being made about it? So I think we also have to have a reality check and the context for the implementation of the technology. What is its purpose? How has it been designed? How has it been tested? And to what extent have the teachers been involved in the requirements capture? Because the teacher has to be at the center of this as well as the student.
A really interesting point, I think, around, you know, when systems go down, which I know we mentioned in our conversation, because there's a need for that kind of planned redundancy in any system, right? I'm conscious we do want to take some questions, and I don't want to miss the opportunity.
We've gone off topic, sorry.
Yeah,
we've not answered your question.
But I do want to talk about what I think has been mentioned a couple of times, which is inclusion, co-design, AI for good, and what AI as a happenstance, as a kind of zeitgeist maybe, causes us to stop and think about how we can start doing things differently. Lizzie, I'm going to start with you on this one, because the content store and the hackathon that was 2 Novembers ago, I think 2 years ago maybe.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It was a while. It feels like everything in the world of AI feels like a very long time ago. I think the hackathon was only probably last year.
Okay.
But yeah.
But they were open spaces
Yeah.
to explore a lot of this, and there were, and I think even with the content store,
Yeah.
you've taken an approach where you're providing an open space in order for kind of new solutions, new perceptions of problems to be addressed.
Yeah, happy to talk about that.
Yeah.
And I think all the work that we have been doing with AI across kind of policy development, and then kind of looking at how we can work to create good applications and tools, has been in co-design with steering groups of educators, and we've had engagement with pupils and parents as well. It's really important to us. So Austin's mentioned the content store, but I'll explain what that is in case others don't know about it. So this is a jointly funded project between DCIT, the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, and the Department for Education. And it is a library of publicly owned data assets from education. And one of our early partners on this is the Open University, and there is some anonymised pupil content in there as well, where we've had full permission to use that, and then things like exam scripts and so on and so forth. And the reason why we're doing this links right back to Renata's point around like having these huge models which have been trained on everything. Actually, if you have a model that's trained on content that's specific for the UK education system, it should give you better quality outputs. And we're running programs where we're supporting developers to develop AI tools for education. So we announced £1 million of the funding for that earlier this year, and there's hackathons going on these tools at the moment, and they are around marking, and they're across a wide range of kind of age ranges and use cases. So one of the ones that I find really interesting, that I think some people in the panel might have gone and seen actually, is a tool that supports the marking of electric circuit boards. So you wouldn't think that might be an AI use case, but we know in FE there's a shortage of teachers in electrical engineering, and something like that could really support with making that process better. So there's lots of ongoing work in that space, and hopefully I can say a bit more about that. But everything we're doing is very deliberative and thinking about, well, how can we make this safe for children and young people? How can we make sure it's good quality?
Amazing. And then, Nick, if I can come to you just quickly, because I think in our discussion we talked about servicing hidden voices, and actually, and I think you touched on it earlier about the role of AI to think a bit differently about different data sets. I think maybe ask you to kind of elaborate on that.
Yeah, I never thought I'd be here talking about data. It's really boring, isn't it? But actually, now I've got into it, and I've got a lot of questions. So as I've sort of looked at literature review around data and how we collect data in education, and I've been fortunate to go around the world and speak at places like this and schools, and when I say data, you might visualise lots of little cells or student outcomes. Actually, when we have more meaningful conversations, we want to look at well-being in data, and what we tend to be looking at the moment are things that we can measure, attendance, performative grades, which tell us what, but they don't tell us why. And I think that's where we need to start moving, and I think that's where some AI plugins will be able to help us with that, and that's what I'm exploring at the moment. And I think we need to stop thinking about what the sector has done. You know, our education system came about in 1944 as an all-through model. A lot of the same data we've got is from the 1960s, which was short after that. We need to start be thinking about where we are going forward, because not only for our new teachers coming in that are a lot more tech savvy than some of the more experienced leaders we've got, but just in general, if we want to keep our children coming into our schools and not losing them to, you know, unattendance or virtual schools or homeschooling, we need to think about how we are putting inclusion with our data, with our technology at the forefront before we lose them.
Thanks very much. And you mentioned well-being, and well-being came up in our conversation, Jared, around kind of engagement with AI. This is something you've done some thinking on. I didn't know whether you'd like to...
Well, I mean, there are many examples in other sectors of the economy where billions have been spent, but it didn't lead to positive outcomes. And again, it's all about user requirements. To what extent in a school setting or in a hospital setting or in a manufacturing setting that digital technologies are being imposed, or it's just we have to also run because the competition is doing it, we must engage with it. And so there are many issues here to do with the whole system's requirements, how it's been designed, deployed, tested. And I suppose just one of the points I wanted to pick up was we're talking about the expertise in the senior leadership team in a school, in the teachers, in the classroom assistants and so forth. The parents are sitting somewhat to the side, and yet they are so much part of the delivery vehicles that we're looking to inform. So as we're implementing new technologies in the school, to what extent are we bringing the parents into this? Just the way you have patient advisory groups across the NHS looking at the role of technology for electronic patient records. Many of the analogies that happen there are happening in schools. There are ethical considerations as well. But how NHS brings patients into the decision making, how do schools bring the parents into the decision making? And again, some of the home environments are not conducive to understanding the role of technology and acceptable use. So there's a number of other things there we need to bring to the party.
And I've had some good conversations with colleagues in the audience who are doing some stuff around bringing in parents in and making sure they're engaged.
Could I just come in on that? As well as thinking and writing and talking about AI in education, I'm also involved in a project that the Nuffield Foundation are doing over the course of 18 months, looking at journeys to adulthood for 14 to 24-year-olds, and I'm running the digital life part of that, and wellbeing is also part of that. We hear a lot that young people, are obsessed with their phones and that we need to take their phones away from them. It's not that straightforward. The phone, it's the content that you can access through a device is one thing, but also access to a device is really important. Maintaining relationships is done now through devices. All of us, you've all got headsets on. You've all got a phone in your pocket probably. The technologies, it's not binary, good, bad. None of this is. It's all contextual, and what can be harmful in one context can, 30 seconds later be a really beneficial thing and very good for your well-being. So one of the challenges we're hearing from young people, though, is that they feel that there's a power imbalance and that technology sits between relationships and interferes with relationships and changes the autonomy and the agency we have with one another. So understanding that's actually really important, and whilst we can collect an awful lot of quantitative data about that and statistics to understand what percentage of people are feeling one way at any one time, qualitative data, talking to one another, hearing people's actually lived experience is a very common term right now, but that sort of peer research, qualitative research, asking, talking, developing is really important as part of the way we start to understand the impact and well-being. Well-being does change, views on well-being change, and access is actually one of the really critical parts. Take these things away, you're not necessarily making people happier. It's about what you're looking at, what you're accessing, and that's really to do with tech companies.
I think that's a really, really fantastic point to go to questions on. I know we might not have been able to speak about everything we want to speak about.
Could say, right?
Which I'd certainly encourage people coming up. I think we're going to steal one of the microphones. Sorry, Jared. So you'll have to share. So questions from the... Oh, we've got a couple of questions. Get one down the front here from Tara. And then a couple over here.
Thanks very much. I'm not sure if I can hear with those on. Thanks very much to the panel. Really interesting, and hi to Gerard and other colleagues that I've worked with in the past as well, Austin. I was just thinking there's a bit of a sort of elephant in the room in the sense that we're looking for innovation in an area, right? Over the last 10 to 15 years, we've been add to the curricula. We've got a bloated curricula. The teachers don't have time to innovate. They don't have time to think. The students don't have time to think. When are we going to move away? Instead of moving around things around the edges, let's look at the model, which was based in the 1950s, and let's see how we can update that, bringing in technology, not in a technological deterministic way, but in a very integrated sort of manner. And I think that does mean leadership, particularly from government, but also within institutions. And I think the point about inconsistent development is a really important one. We have to improve and make more consistent any transformation projects that we do bring in. But I think without the core, how do we move on? And I think a lot of practitioners, and I've run a school myself, the largest school in the UK actually, 4,000 children. I've also looked after 1,000 excluded children. We're not reaching them at the moment. This one-size-fits-all approach, which worked in the 1940s and 50s, it doesn't work. What are we going to do? Where's the leadership, and how can we go forward?
Thanks very much.
I feel like that's one for me. So, as most colleagues in the room will be aware, we currently have Becky Francis conducting an independent curriculum and assessment review. And it was felt that there was like a specific need to really look at kind of digital and technology. It's very weird hearing it through both ways. Digital and technology literacy, as well as that point about like, well, how do we use technology in the classroom? So the findings, so they've just wrapped up the task and finish group with expert advisors. They've just wrapped that up. So I'm hopeful that the findings will come out as part of the curriculum assessment review a bit later in the summer. I can't say more about what's in that yet because it's not in the public domain, but it is being thought about. Yeah, and I think people are very aware that there's been a lot of feedback from the sector about the size of the curriculum. Yeah.
Thanks very much. We have a couple of questions. I'm going to go to two in the row here. The gentleman just right there, if that's all right, and then. And if you wouldn't mind just saying who you are and where you're from, actually, as well.
Hi there, good morning everyone. I'm Joe Arday. I'm from Brentwood County High School. I'm also part of the DFE EdTech Evidence Group looking at tools. My question is, and it's also as a serving teacher, we're forgetting about the parents, but I would like to know what type of training will be available to parents. I'm a parent of a 9-year-old child myself who's grown up in the AI generation, and I speak to many parents through Parents' Evening, and a lot of them always say to me, my child's very tech savvy when it comes to AI, but I am not sure what they're doing or what's going on. So what type of training is available to parents? As I call it, the education trifecta, students, teachers, parents.
That's a very good question. I think that's probably not just a response for the department, actually. I think we could be looking and exploring what we could be doing to provide some of the guidance around that. But I think, actually, it's probably a collective problem to solve. So what are tech companies doing, Austin, on that space? Because I think all of us as adults in an AI world, not just parents, need to understand the implications of that for ourselves.
I mean, it's kind of training for parents. Digital life is life. We've lived with the internet, phones, technology for 20 odd years. Like, it's a responsibility of all of us to think about what we're doing. And certainly, again, going back to the research I'm doing with younger people, they're more concerned with how their parents are behaving on their devices than they are with themselves. The amount of times I've heard young people say, so I tried to have a conversation with my dad last night over dinner and he was just on TikTok the whole time. Like, I'm trying to do better at managing my online engagement. Why can't my dad, sort it out? So I feel a bit uncomfortable about the notion of training us. We all have a responsibility to live a good life and use technology and the things around us, eat well, etc. For an awfully long time, when it comes to food, right, we all think we can just get away with eating whatever we like until we might have a health scare, and then we adopt better eating behaviours, right? The same goes with technology. We shouldn't wait for it to go wrong before we start to use it better.
Anyone else want to come back?
Well, I'm going to hotfoot it from here over to the SEND Theatre, where I'm talking with Francis Akinda about online safety for underserved students following adolescence. And then I'm later talking with the CEO of the Digital Poverty Alliance. So I will talk about that in more detail. I do think we have responsibilities, and I do think there needs to be an empathy for families where they don't understand the safeguarding, where they might have students, young people who have a variety of needs and they are concerned about the online space, and the reason they're falling through the gaps is because no one's taking responsibility for it, and sometimes those parents aren't in a position to take responsibility for themselves. So for me, I think there's sometimes we've got to think about less what's measurable and more what's meaningful, and what we can do within our communities to the best of our ability and offer that help where it stands.
Can I chip back in? Because I think there's also a responsibility around what tech companies putting out there. That's what Nas was probably about to say. And how do we make sure that it meets safety standards? So we've published some world-leading safety expectations about AI use in education, which lots of the major tech companies have signed up to. You can see on our website who has signed up to that. So those tools should be safe for young people too. So it eliminates some of that need for parents to do that research and understand, okay, what is safe and what isn't. But that there's a responsibility on the behalf of the tech companies as well on this, and we know that they are up for doing that.
Yeah. Gemma, did you want to come on that one as well?
I think it's the issue of standards.
Yeah.
To what extent do we have acceptable use standards right across the economy and all lines of business and public services and so on? And at the moment, from my experience, each individual school has its own acceptable use policies, and they put that in a newsletter, it's given to the parents and so on. But how do you actually implement that and make it real on a busy evening when the parents are coming home from work exhausted, the students have a deadline and so on? But it touches on another aspect, which is acceptable use policy. And to what extent, the comment about the curriculum, is the curriculum fit for purpose today for those students that will be entering into the workplace in 10 years' time? What will the workplace look like having embraced all of these different technical interventions? So having that lens to look at the curriculum and to understand what can be updated, that we actually are preparing the students for professional life.
I've just got 1 minute left, and I did want to take one more question quickly. I might get one panellist to respond to, if that's all right. But there's a lady just here on the left. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Victoria Headland. I'm from Goldsmiths. It's really interesting. You all paint a picture of training and how important that is. How do you see that matching with the ITT ECF and the teacher standards, which don't really echo digital literacy?
No.
Well, I would say there's a lot missing still. Media literacy, been sort of kicked out since 2010 when social media came in, everyone. And I'm really pleased that there's work going on with Bournemouth University and Ofcom to look at how we can get more teacher training. I think the problem we've got is there's not maybe a wider forward aspirational reach when it comes to these things, and it feels like we're picking up things as we go along. But I know, the DFE they're bringing the people together. They could bring more people together maybe to talk as well. But there is movement, and I think for the first time,
on our to-do list.
It feels like we are starting to come more maturely together to have these conversations, and if that then ignites change and research and activities around it, I think that can only be a good thing. I'm going to try and stay optimistic.
I think there's an interesting thing about coming back to training, and God, my brain is thinking about a million things to answer all these questions. Training somebody to use something as a tool is doable. Training us to have a thing that just underpins our everyday, that feels odd to me. So, and I think that actually comes to the core of one of these things. Are we going to see these technologies as a tool that we use for a very specific purpose, or are we just going to welcome it in to underpin everything? In which case, that's a much more complicated conversation to have.
I think a really good answer to end us on. Out of time, getting a flashing red light. So can I just ask you all to give our fantastic panel a round of applause?